All right, everybody, we are live. It is the Rick Mast Show. I'm Charlie Marlow. That is the great Rick Mast. He's got his Atlanta Braves hat. He's sporting the beard as well. Is that a winter thing? Is that a new thing? Rick.
Charlie, I haven't done this. Maybe when I was 20 years of age, I had a beard one time. And then for about 6 months when I drove for Remington in 97, I had a Fu Manchu thing going. And other than that, and what happened, I went like 3 or 4 days showering and I didn't have a razor, right? I lost my razor. It got thrown away and I had this little gruff growing, right? And I'm like, maybe I'll just let it grow out a little bit. But I don't know how much longer this is going to take. I'm not sure they'll like it, Man, if you talk, you get food hung and you have whiskers, you blow your nose and things, they're just not clean like I think they should be. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Well, it looks good. It usually comes down to what the missus thinks. For example, my wife loves the fact that I have this, whatever you want to call it. It's not really a beard, but it's something. But she likes it, so that's why I keep it.
Well, so far, that's what's going on. I think my bride likes it. My children do not like it, but my bride likes it. So we'll hang on to it here for a little bit.
All right, let's get right to it, buddy, because NASCAR season is upon us. We had the Clash on Sunday, really all weekend long. Saturday, you had the heat races and all that. I thought it was fantastic. I'll give my thoughts also, but it's your show, buddy. What'd you think of the Clash at Bowman Gray Stadium?
Man, oh man. When they first announced it, everybody liked it because of being at Bowman Gray, but then everybody thought, well, it's going to be like the Coliseum. Well, guess what? It wasn't like the Coliseum. It was like friggin' Madhouse, right? It was like the modified stuff that everybody's used to watching down there. And it's just you think it's the same size, but it's really not. The guys had more room. I'm comparing it to the Coliseum. They had more room to do stuff and maneuver, and we actually saw a couple guys pass on the outside, which you just cannot do there. But it's the same kind of deal in any short track. You get under somebody, if you could just get an inch under them in the center of the turn and squeeze a little bit and bump a little bit, you can make a pass and make things happen. And that's what a lot of the guys did. The thing, I tell you, Charlie, the thing that really got me about this whole deal was the excitement from the competitors, right? And I want to dive into that a little bit because, I want to give you a story. I know a championship driver that's out there right now that had a conversation with one of my drivers not very long ago, okay? And he was asking him all kinds of questions about in our era, what it was like to go to Charlotte with 180,000 people, right? Or go to Bristol with 130,000 people. Go to Richmond with 110,000 people. He was genuinely interested in what it was like from a driver's perspective to be in the middle of that, right? And when I heard about all that conversation, I got to thinking, when I was there, we came all through the 90s, and I watched the explosion. I watched all the grandstands being built. I watched you couldn't get into the racetracks, you couldn't get out of the racetracks, right? I'm talking Friday and Saturdays. A lot of times we would do, like a Friday night or Saturday night, the sponsors or whoever would have us going somewhere and doing an autograph session, and we would, we'd go to it. Well, it got to be a lot of those places. Even on Saturdays, they had to have a helicopter pick us up to take us to the event because there was just so many friggin' people, even there the day before the race. You couldn't get in and out of the racetracks, And but the other part of it is, and Chase Elliott brought it up. Chase brought it up. He's talking about, yes, a small venue. He said, but man, the excitement that was in here, right? What was it, 17,000 people, and the place was packed. And it is a madhouse, and that fan base there is wide open anyhow, right? And we saw that when Stenhouse wrecked the dude, the Byers guy, or whoever it was, or whichever one he wrecked, and everybody in the stands was giving him the finger, which was typical at Bowman Gray, but it was so cool. But the drivers, man, what I'm saying is the drivers I think they got a sense of what we dealt with or what we had every single week. Because when we raced, man, I mean, when you went out there, the stands were sold out. They couldn't build the stands quick enough. When they built the new grandstand, it was sold out, right? You couldn't get a ticket, and people were hooping and hollering and loud, and just it was such a magical time. What the drivers experienced at Bowman Gray was in a much, much, much smaller scale of what we were able to witness and be involved with for a better part of a decade. And it was just, and the only reason I say that is because this championship driver was really inquisitive and asking how it used to be, and he got to where, like, he was sad that he doesn't get to experience what we experienced with the enthusiasm and the just sheer volumes of friggin' people, that we had. And, I feel bad that today's drivers don't get to witness that. But if every one of you guys that's listening to this broadcast, you drivers, if you look at the environment that you dealt with Sunday night at Bowman Gray, multiply that by 10, right, for numbers of people, that's what it used to be like with us. And, times have changed and everything's worked around. We got TV now. We got all the different marketing and everything, and the sport's going along just great. But, I just, it was really strange, Charlie, that a driver from today's era would be so inquisitive about how it used to be, and then be kind of sad that he wasn't, he didn't get to experience that. Does that make sense? It does to me.
Absolutely. And I was surprised, I'd heard of Bowman Gray, but then as you start to research a little bit, you start to watch the coverage. For me, I was watching all the driver media availabilities on Saturday. I was surprised they hadn't raced there since 1971. I thought it was not as long ago that the Cup Series was there. So, I mean, we're talking about, over 50 years. Had you ever raced at Bowman Gray coming up in any type of series in your career?
No, never did. I was only there one time. I think when I visited Richard Childress's compound a few years ago, I dropped by there and just looked at the place because I'd never attended an event. And then when they made the TV series of it, the Madhouse, that kind of got sparked my interest. Like, well, I need to go down and watch one of those races, and I never did. But you could see from the Madhouse series, and you could see Saturday and Sunday's telecast when he showed the fans and the stands and what was going on. Hell, the people never sat down, Charlie. They stood up for the friggin'. We went to a friggin' Cole Swindell. Yeah, I believe it was Cole Swindell concert 2 or 3 weeks ago. And friggin' people kept standing and standing and standing. I had good seats. And I'm like, man, I'm old. Somebody sit down. It was like halfway through the concert before the people start sitting down, right? I'm like, damn, don't do this. Well, they stood up all night at Bowman Gray. 200 laps, dude. The people were standing up. They never sat down, right? That's excitement. That's somebody's wanting to see what's happening. And then, of course, it pisses you off if you get tired and old and you want to sit down and you can't see the race. But, yeah, what was your question?
If you'd ever raced there, which you said you hadn't, but you had been
Right.
there the one time. So if you go for the whole weekend, it being the Madhouse, so you had a couple wrecks, couple spins here and there, but I thought it was the right amount, right? It wasn't a wreck fest where it was an embarrassment. I thought it was just enough racy, raceability. You had on Saturday night, Ryan Preece did spin out John Hunter Nemechek because he wanted to get in the show. You had Hocevar also on Sunday, but it was pretty racy. And obviously Chase Elliott wins. But look, if your complaint, let's say in the last several years about the Clash in the Coliseum was, oh, it's too small, you can't pass. I mean, Ryan Blaney went from dead last, 23rd, to second. And he had one of the better quotes on Sunday. He said, look, I probably could have just bulldozed Chase Elliott, but I don't want to leave this place with the pitchforks coming out, knowing all the Chase Elliott fans are going to be mad at me. So, I mean, look, he was respectful there, but he passed freaking, 21 cars, whatever it was. So you could pass.
Yeah. And I think it was, 6 cautions Sunday night, 7 with the halfway break. I think I'm right about that number. Now, if you start out Saturday night watching the heat races, you like the very first heat race, I'm like, man, we're going to be 3 o'clock in the morning getting all these races over with. But they got all those wrecks out of the way, it seemed like, in the first heat race. A lot of that stuff stopped then. And then by the time we got to Sunday's race, man, it was just it was a perfect deal. I mean, there's a reason, Charlie. There's a reason that Bowman Gray Stadium packs those grandstands all through the spring and summer with the regional shows, the modified shows, and the other series that runs there. There's a reason for that. You know what I mean? And the reason is the competition. The guys trying to get by each other. They get mad and finally move somebody out of the way, and then they start fighting. Well, I don't think it's so much the fighting. I think it's the actual competition. The track. the track just lends itself to that type of environment, and that type of excitement. It's kind of like the old Southside Speedway in Richmond. Real reminiscent of that racetrack. That racetrack, real reminiscent of Bowman Gray, and they're working hard to try to get that track back open. As we speak. But they're it's 17,000 people, right? That's not a big number for Cup, but if that was a Coliseum seating, you're right. If you had 80,000 seats, you would probably, maybe not this time, but next year it would probably sell out. It would probably sell that thing out just because of the excitement that race produced for everybody watching it. And if you just it's short. It's what was it, 63 miles an hour, I think, average lap speed, which means you're running 80 before you stop in the quarters, and it's not fast for Cup cars, but it's still racing. It's still it's the core being of what we do, man. Everybody that is racing at Daytona next week, all those guys started out somewhere on these little tiny bull rings. And that's where you learn your trade as a driver. That's where you learn your craft, man, and master yourself. And then when you go on out and make it big time, then when you come back to one of these deals, your skill level has just improved so much, and it's just a fun deal for all the drivers. And thankfully, thank God that it worked out for NASCAR and the fans. Because this whole deal is about the fans, man. You know it, Charlie. It's about the fans. The drivers don't do anything any different. I mean, when the green flag drops, they're running just as hard as they can. You're running on that edge of that envelope without wrecking or spinning out or losing control, whether you be at Bowman Gray or Talladega. It's all the same.
Yeah, and you talked about the 17,000 fans. To me, it's not just about the total number, right? It presented well. I wasn't there, but it looked good on TV. And I also think sometimes that more intimate atmosphere, a packed standing room crowd of 17,000, to me, on TV especially, looks better than half full grandstands if there's only, let's say there's 30,000 people at a race, but there's a bunch of empty grandstand seats, right? It looked cool on TV. It looked throwback, retro, classic, old school, whatever word you want to use. I also think just the fact that it was cold added to making it look cool. You saw Noah Gragson with his camouflage. You saw Denny Hamlin there bundled up. It just seemed like a really cool throwback and a different, I think NASCAR is going for different, and sometimes different isn't always better, but in this case, I think it was a unique look. I mean, the weather, the bands on the field before the game, it was just a cool, distinct event, which I think was NASCAR's goal. And it was a great event.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the shot of Denny Hamlin with some drivers sitting on the grass, outside of the track, watching the heat races and all that. And that's what we used to do, man. You'd be at a racetrack and you'd be running heat races. You'd go up to pit wall or the wall and stand there against the wall watching the race as a driver. And, if you go to a lot of these shows now, the dirt tracks and all, they do the same thing. And you're sitting up there, and if it's hot, maybe you drink a beer. If it's cold, you're snuggled up. And it makes for an exciting experience for the drivers, and it turns out for the fans. I got a couple buddies of mine who went down there, and they were telling me about the whole experience. And he said they ended up leaving not too far past halfway of the race because his buddy had nothing on but a T-shirt. And my buddy was telling him, man, it's gonna get cold tonight. You need to take a coat in there. No, I don't need no coat. Well, the poor guy sat there and shivered and shook and he about froze. He said they finally had to leave halfway past the halfway point, like 3/4 of the way through the race. They had to leave. And I said, well, did you ever sit down? He said, sit down. I said, yeah. I said, during the race, it looked like a lot of people were standing. He thought for a minute and he says, no, we stood up the whole time. I said, you didn't think about that sitting down? He said, and he looked around a little bit. He said, no, never thought about sitting down. Hell, everybody's standing up. Everybody's standing up, hooting and hollering. You couldn't, if you sat down, you couldn't see anything. But I never even once got tired, he said. And he's got gout in his foot, right? So his foot hurts a lot. He said, now, once I got to the car, it dawned on me I really screwed up tonight because I've been standing for this whole friggin' event. He said, but when we were in there, we never thought about sitting down. You know what I mean? And like with me at a concert, I think about sitting down when them bastards are in front of me blocking my view, right? So, that's just one guy his experience of what he felt there. You stood the whole time and didn't know, you didn't know you weren't sitting down. And I think all those optics, like to your point, all those optics came through on TV, right? Place was packed. People were, hooping and hollering and cussing and giving the finger. Dude, it's like that time I went to Charlotte in the middle of all that deal when you had stands all the way around there. And, well, maybe they hadn't built up then, but it was packed. It was during the Bodine-Earnhardt feud days, right? And I rode a pace lap around Charlotte on a convertible before the race, pre-race, with Jeff Bodine. I must have qualified beside him. Let me tell you something. When I came back in, I went straight to Dick Beatty. I said, Dick, here's the deal. Anytime in the future we have pre-race parade laps and I qualify beside Jeff Bodine, you're going to start me in the rear. He says, why? I said, I am not going to do that again. He said, what do you mean? I said, dude, I ended up down in the front seat, barreled down. They were throwing stuff over the stands at Bodine, right? I'm talking chicken bones and beer cans and bottles. This stuff was coming out of the friggin' grandstands at us, right? And because they were all, of course, Earnhardt fans that hated Bodine at the time. And it was the craziest times, man. They did that at Talladega on the backstretch after the race. But either Jeff Gordon or Jimmy Johnson one time after the race littered the whole racetrack with that stuff. And then, when you see a group of fans together and they're that excited and that into it and they're doing that stuff, it's just exciting. And that's what I witnessed Sunday night at Bowman Gray. The same type of excitement, electricity, and enthusiasm that we used to live every single week,
So what do you think? There's a lot of discussion now about the future of the Clash and what they should do. You already did LA. You could go back to Daytona. I like the idea of just kind of sprinkling around some of these old school short tracks. And if you have a different track, they already did this with North Wilkesboro, obviously with the All-Star race, but let's say there's an underperforming track that has some historical power within racing. You bring the Clash there, you help renovate the facilities, you get the safer barriers. It's good for racing all around at a grassroots level. I don't know. I think that's kind of the way to go. Maybe you have 3, 4, 5 tracks, shorter tracks like Bowman Gray, and you kind of rotate them like that. What do you think?
Yeah, but we've heard that a lot of people have talked about that this week, Charlie. And I've seen it written. I've seen people talking about it. I think it's a great idea, right? It's a great idea. Bowman Gray has made its case to bring it back, right? It's made its case. You need to bring it back here. And I totally understand if they go back and do that. The other side of that, and a lot of people putting voicing this out there, you could go to a track that's struggling, man. I mean, any of them, go in there and spend the money and spruce it up like it, put those lights in there, right? Get it all spruced up. The downside, Charlie, is we're talking 17,000 seating capacity at Bowman Gray. Not very, very few of the tracks that we talk about have that capability. I mean, you're talking 7, 8, 9, maybe a couple of them with a capability of holding 10,000 if you put temporary bleachers up. There's where the rub comes in, right? That's really, honestly, Charlie, that's the only negative to this thing that I can see. Now, the infrastructure and all that, well, it's already there for however many seats they got. But if you could do that once a year, go to South Boston, go to Hickory, go wherever, right? Anywhere across the country, really, that a track that's been there a long time, has got longevity, it's run properly, it's got good promoters, it's got a little bit of a future. You go in there and you spend the money and do the stuff to get for that one race, and then that'll carry that track for decades, right? The stuff they were talking about Bowman Gray now, it's ready for the next 50 years, okay? And I think it's a great idea. It's just, it comes down to the number of people in the stands. You don't want to go to a racetrack and they got one set of grandstands on the front straightaway and they're packed for that race. That's fine. But the TV catches 3/4 of the racetrack or half the racetrack empty with no people. You didn't get that sense at Bowman Gray. You got the sense of all the way around there, even though it wasn't in 3 and 4, but the rest of it was so full and packed. That would be the only thing that I would, and then you could go in and spend the money, put up grandstands, man. Do temporary grandstands, put up a few thousand. You could do that. But along with that comes infrastructure, have an infrastructure to be able to handle the traffic flow and toilets. Like Humpy Wheeler used to say 3 T's, traffic, tickets, and toilets, right? And you got to have all those. So there's there's, when you add something to the equation, then it adds something else to the equation that has to be addressed and looked at. But I think on its premise, I think it's a great idea. Each year go somewhere different, and in 10 years, man, you fixed up 10 tracks. Because listen, dude, they can say what they want to say and do what they want to do. But those people at Bowman Gray that pack that thing every Saturday night, those are the people that turn the race on Sunday and watch the Cup Series, right? It was that way back in my day. I got all kinds of proof of my earplugs. I got all kinds of proof of these things happening. You excite the Saturday night local racetrack fan with Winston Cup presents, or no, I'm sorry, Cup presents. I say Winston Cup because that's what we used to do. We would excite the Saturday night race fans with our presence, being there for autographs or running an exhibition race or whatever. Those people would then turn around and turn in on Sunday and watch the race. You take all those racetracks away, or a bunch of them away, which has been happening. We've lost so many short tracks in our country. You lose that. You lose that possible viewer that's going to watch your race on Sunday, watch that commercial, and buy that beer that's advertising, right? So, it's a big deal. It's a giant situation that encompasses so many things that we used to have that we don't have now. And I think something like this would help that. Yeah.
And maybe I'm biased, we're biased. You obviously made your career in NASCAR. I now am essentially a full-time NASCAR content creator. So my living is based on NASCAR. So I think I'm more excited just when the season starts. But it does feel like there's more positivity this year, coming off the Clash being very successful. Everybody takes a week off for the Super Bowl. Of course, you have the Daytona 500 after that. But I don't know. I'm just, and we'll get to a couple not so great storylines in a second. But I don't know. I think things are pretty good for NASCAR right now. You're in year 4 of the next gen car. They're figuring that out. I feel like they tinker and get better with that every single year. I know there's a lot of discussion about the playoff format, and they're not going to change it this year, but it does draw interest in the sport, even if some old school fans don't necessarily love it. The lawsuit thing, which I think was the big story of the offseason, I don't really see that hanging over the season, right? I think even Denny Hamlin, everybody involved, I mean, there's a lot of storylines around the NASCAR lawsuit during the winter, but I think they even realize it's probably not great for the sport during season to focus on that. So I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of positivity. What do you think?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The lawsuit thing is a good example, right? It came out, right at our championship week or whatever was going on. It kind of took away some of the headlines from our championship week, I felt like, and then we went through it there a little bit in December. But now I think it's just one of those deals where, all right, they got the lawsuit going on. No big deal, right? It's just something over here on the side going on. I agree 100%. I don't think it's going to bring any negativity to us right now because it's an older story, and everybody likes the 24-hour bait clip right now, Charlie. And, everything else that's going on, they started out, social media started out early Saturday with the heat races, raising hell about why we're running here, right? By the time Sunday night, 95% of that negativity went away, right? Because the guys put on a heck of a show and everybody's excited and liked it. So that's kind of what we're built. That's the momentum we're going to be carrying into Daytona next week. And it'll carry through. If we go down there and, we don't have any major problems, we have a good, exciting race, which we always do at Daytona. I think they've got tons of momentum on their side right now. I mean, so many of our storylines are gone, and for so long it's been about this race car, right? This new car. Well, you can't keep beating the dead horse. The guys keep ragging on that. It is what it is. We got it, and everybody's happy about it now, or maybe not happy, but they've got what they've got, And I'm gonna tell you something else. People can like this or not like it, but Chase Elliott dominating that race and winning that race is big. It's big for this sport, right? Chase Elliott needs to be a dominant winner this year, right? It's like when we had Dale Jr. still running with us, right? Dale Jr. The sport needed him to be a champion at some point, right? Be a dominant driver, just because he's the most popular driver. And what he does, just like Chase today, what he does drives TV ratings. I mean, people might not like it or might agree or not agree, but I'm telling you, he drives TV ratings. And for him to dominate that race and win the way he did, that 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 bodes well for momentum for everything else that goes on.
Yeah, Kenny Wallace and I were talking about this on Sunday night. We did a live stream right after the race, and we were discussing just the superstars or lack thereof in NASCAR. And he said, I believe that he thinks Denny Hamlin is the only real superstar. And I'm just thinking, if you're thinking off the top of your head, the big names, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, you mentioned Chase Elliott. I don't know though. And I mean, obviously Ryan Blaney is a great driver. I don't know if any of the current crop of NASCAR drivers have that Q rating beyond NASCAR racing fans, even to the casual sports fans. I think that's what NASCAR has to work on marketing wise. And they obviously know that. But I bring that up because it is kind of a big story that Ross Chastain is going to be in a Super Bowl commercial, right? And for a lot of people, whatever the number for the Super Bowl, 100 million, however many people watch it. I mean, it is important for some of the big NASCAR names to kind of be out there more on a national stage. Like when I was growing up in the 90s, you'd see Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon. You would see Dale Earnhardt Jr. later on when I was in my teens. And I think we need more of that in NASCAR. So it's a good step that Ross Chastain is going to be in a Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, this is a whole different area, Charlie, we're talking about. But it's been one of my deals for a good while, and I've spoken to NASCAR over the years about this. Is heroes. You could call it whatever you want to call it, but to me, it's called heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, and I hate keep going back to my time because my time,
No, do it.
a lot
People love it.
a lot of my time wasn't that great, but there were great periods in my time and great things that happened. And one of the great things that happened that was going on in my time, these guys I were racing against, they were friggin' American heroes, right? They're like a part of Americana. An average race fan, they could identify with Dale Earnhardt, right? They could identify with a Harry Gant. They could identify with these guys. And then somebody like Jeff Gordon comes along, a different guy that a lot of their race fans couldn't identify with, but he brought a whole contingent of younger race fans that they could identify with, right? Then you had the good, the bad, the ugly, the evil, and all that, right? With the feuds and the racing. But Rusty Wall, I mean, so many of these guys. Hell, they were my heroes, Charlie, and I was trying to kick their ass every week, right? And I'm like, which was a pretty weird phenomenon. But somehow or for some reason, we're not perceiving these guys as heroes, right? The closest you're going to get is the names you just said, Chase, and hell, who'd you just say? Denny Hamlin,
Larson, Denny,
and Larson. Larson so much because he races all over the country all the time. He picks up all these Saturday night bullring race fans all the time. These people love Kyle Larson, and hell, my wife mentioned the other day, I really like Kyle Larson. Really? Why? He can get anything and drive it. I said, yeah, and win. She said, yeah. I'm like, damn, that's a pretty. You got to know my wife to know that was a very, very bold statement, Charlie. Okay, because she just isn't as intense in NASCAR as she used to be, right?
She's a casual fan.
Yeah, casual fan, you might say. But man, it's just like, and I don't know what we do to get the hero status back. I don't know. I know. Golly, we go off on this stuff when the great Ken Squire, dude. When Ken Squire used to do TV, when that race was going on, you absolutely felt that those guys you're watching in those race cars were modern day gladiators. Just damn life, damn everything. I'm going to win this race or die trying. And Ken Squire made you feel like that, right? Barney Hall did it on radio. He did the same thing on radio. I don't know if it's some of that we could add to it. Maybe drivers, expressing their own personality. Listen, dude, I know a lot of these guys. Well, a lot of them I don't know, but some of them I do know. And what you see on TV is maybe not exactly what they really are, but they're so buttoned up. They're so buttoned up on TV because that's just the way the world is now. You can't you can't express yourself and say things and do things the way you want to because the sponsor might get mad that you did this wrong. And, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I do know this, Charlie. If Americans, fans, race fans, if they perceive somebody, a driver, to be a hero to them, it drives everything. It drives everything for that sport. It drives that fan to buy that product. It drives that fan to, no, I'm not going to record the race. I got to watch it. I got to see it live, right? It drives all that stuff. And, I'm not knocking the guys. Don't listen. I'm not knocking the guys that are racing. I'm just saying, where the sport is right now, what the guidelines and everything these guys got to, operate under. I think it takes away from that. But you still put a good product on the racetrack. You make a good race out of the race, and then it'll always, that part will always work. That part will always be true. That part will always work. But we can do other things to make it better.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have talked about the changing paint schemes and this being part of the issue. I just wonder how you can combat that, though, because another big storyline of the weekend was the lack of sponsorship. And we'll talk about the Xfinity in a second here. I'll bring up the question or the quote here. Let's see. Our guy Ronnie McKee says, who in the world is going to replace Xfinity since they have announced their departure, obviously, from that series? But so, and look, for an exhibition race, you're going to have some different paint schemes and all that. But, I feel like Chase Elliott is usually one of those cars you can find his Napa car. And he had a white car. It looked cool. Right. Denny Hamlin had the white Sport Clips. And we know that the FedEx, he was one of the cars you could almost count on with Logano for the last, 10 years, the yellow Logano, and then Denny Hamlin with the purple and the orange FedEx. That's gone. So he's got Sport Clips. Another big storyline, Bob Pockrass asked Denny Hamlin, is it alarming to look at your hauler and not see a lot of sponsors? And Denny Hamlin talked about how tough it is basically out there with inflation. And so you say you always like to spin it back to your day. I mean, back in your day, it seemed like, and I've heard stories that these Fortune 500 companies couldn't even get on a car, right? There were more companies than the 40 or 43 cars, whatever it was, in the field. And now you have some of the best drivers and best teams in NASCAR having to string together 5, 6, 10 sponsors to get through the season. And I know this is a storyline we've talked about a lot, but I do think that's something NASCAR has to figure out. Maybe if you stick with certain colors, but just matching the driver to the car easily on TV and at the supermarket, if you're seeing these guys being advertised, that was part of the reason that you guys skyrocketed. Even when I was watching NASCAR, you knew Earnhardt, you knew Jeff Gordon, you knew Dale Earnhardt Jr., you knew at least like 5 cars. And now I feel like I watch every race and I have to spend the first 10 minutes figuring out who's who.
Yeah, even as people like you and me, like me even, I do the same thing, Charlie. I cut the race on and I'll be halfway through the race still trying to figure out where that car is, right? And you can't do it. And I think that's just another piece of, something that we're missing that we used to have. There's so many things, right? The heroes I talked about, the cars being the same color all year long. I mean, like you say, you knew when you went to race back in the 90s, I don't care who you were, if I was a fan, even casual fans, they already seen that car. They knew who that car is, right? The Kellogg's car, Terry Labonte. It's all like that. And it kind of goes back a little bit to what my buddy Mark Martin fusses about. He wants the numbers moved back to the door, right? My old boy Mark, he hates those numbers moved to the front.
Yes, he
does. He expresses himself all the time about that. And I get it. There's my thing falling out again. But anyhow, I think that's just another little part of the equation that we're missing. The problem is, Charlie, what do? You assign a team a paint scheme for the year, and then you can put on whatever sponsor you want. That won't work. It's the car has got to represent totally the company. So, it's a trade-off there. I mean, and yeah, the money's not there like it was. When we were there, man, in the 90s, golly bum. And that's what we had one other podcast. That's what really all the sponsors we had is what created today's charter system, right? It was preluded by the provisionals. And the provisionals come along because instead of having 30 corporate 500 sponsored cars, we had 45 that were sponsored. And that meant 2 or 3 were going to go home each week. So the corporate sponsor, big sponsors, would miss the race. And that wasn't good. That wasn't good for our sport. But that's a whole different era. Different era, different thing. We're in a whole different deal right now. And, I don't know what they do about that. I'm glad that there's some parts of NASCAR that I would love to work for and take a paycheck from them right now. But there are other parts of NASCAR that I wouldn't. They just couldn't pay me to do some of the things that has to be done, right? Yeah.
So, like, what are you talking about? What are the big challenges you think? The ones that you wouldn't want to do?
Trying to figure out how to make a driver. How can I make this driver a hero? How can he, or at least be perceived as a hero to the average fan? How can I do that and still keep the corporate image that this sponsor wants this guy to project? Right? How the hell do you do that? I don't know how you do that. I just don't know. That's a thing that it's almost got to happen naturally. In which it did. It was very natural the way it happened in our day. But again, it's a different time. It's a different era. This world's different right now. It's just a different deal. All we can do really is from the competition side, try to keep these cars as close as we can keep them, right? And then let the chips fall where they may.
And then what do you think about the Xfinity series and the naming? I think it's kind of interesting because, and you mentioned it earlier, you said Winston Cup. And when I was growing up, it was always Winston Cup. And then it went through the cell phone era, whatever it was, Nextel and Sprint Cup and all that. And then you had the Busch series. It became Nationwide, now Xfinity. I feel like trucks is always just kind of called trucks. It's the Craftsman Truck Series. But I do think it's kind of funny because now NASCAR has kind of switched the sponsorship. So they have those core sponsors. So now it's just Cup. Everybody kind of calls trucks. Xfinity is the one that probably needs some branding. And the one that comes to my head first is like, well, Busch should sponsor it. We should bring it back. It should be the Busch series because that's what everybody calls it anyway. But I'm thinking, if I'm AB, why would you spend money? They call it Busch series anyway. It's not the Busch series. It hasn't been the Busch series in how many years? 20 years, whatever it is. But people they already have the branding from years back because people still call it the Busch series.
Hell, I do. In my everyday life, I said, who won the Busch Series race yesterday, right? I do that. I find myself saying Xfinity Series more and more, but it's still the Busch Series. But losing that one, that's just another. I don't know, man. Charlie, dude, I remember maybe I've talked about this before, but maybe not. I was a teenager down in Asheville, North Carolina. And I think I was in Bosco Lowe's shop. Jack Ingham and Butch Lindley were in there. Jack Ingham and Butch Lindley were the winningest late model drivers going at that time. That was right before the Busch Series started. Those guys kicked everybody's butt every week. Both of them had full tire deals, right? They both had sponsors on the car. And I remember they're sitting there talking. And I mean, they were the elite of late model at that time. And I remember them talking about, they're having trouble with sponsors. They couldn't keep up. They couldn't get the money. They couldn't get NASCAR to help them. If they tried to help them, NASCAR would take their sponsor and just on and on and on and on and on. And finally, I'll never forget Butch Lindley said, it wouldn't surprise me. We could go to Daytona in 2 or 3 years. That whole thing just be a big marshland, right? And I took that to heart because I was just a teenager, wide-eyed teenager, wanted to race for a living, right? Or I wanted to race. And I'm like, damn, this racing could go away, right? Charlie, here we are 50, 60 years later. It's the same friggin' conversations, right? We don't have money enough to race. We have trouble getting sponsors, on and on and on and on and on. The only thing I ever seen change, the numbers got bigger, right? Just more zeros added on to everything. Now, we went through all that in the 90s and 2000s. And, now we're back to square one, you might say, in some of the areas about this money thing. But, that was all the deal about the new car. The new car is going to be a lot cheaper, and the way we're doing things a lot cheaper for the teams. Well, everybody's still struggling. The biggest thing that's happened is right now, and me and Mark talked about this. Mark Martin on the phone is the driver's salaries. You know what I mean? The driver's salaries, they do not make. They just don't make what guys we used to make when we came through, right? Because the money's not there. Now, I'm sure somebody like Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, they're locked in, right? Grandfather did. But so many of the other younger guys coming along, they don't. it's just a different, if you look at, if you can't compare us to other sports in so many things, apples to oranges, that NFL athlete, MLB, NBA athletes, what they get paid. Drivers don't get paid what those dudes do, right? Now, we were headed that way at one time, a decade, two ago, but it's not that way right now. And, everybody's suffering a little bit because of the money thing, but, the show must go on. And whatever series we're going to call it, I just soon call it, hell, I call it BGN. That's Busch Grand National. Just call it BGN series.
All right.
Sponsored by Longhorn Steakhouse. I don't know. You know what I mean? They'll have somebody. They'll have somebody to replace Xfinity, maybe at a smaller value or different value or whatever. But it'll be something. They'll come up with something.
So our guy Pulsar Lights says, let's see. I still like the way it used to be. The Clash at Daytona, the weekend before the Daytona 500, the fans and the team could spend the entire first week at Daytona. And we talked about this earlier, but I do think that's interesting in terms of the rotation. I would include Daytona in that rotation of some of the other short tracks also. I think Kevin Harvick has talked about this for years. You need to make everything an event. And if it's at Daytona every single year, it does, in my opinion, maybe other people disagree, but it loses its luster a little bit. But if you don't have it there for a long time, people start to miss it. And to me, it's like the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, I know now it seems like the NFL, they basically reward you. If you build a new stadium, they give you a Super Bowl. So we're seeing cold weather cities getting Super Bowls. But for a while, it was like New Orleans, Miami, Phoenix, LA, whatever it is. There was 4 or 5 markets where the Super Bowl was there a lot. And I think that's how NASCAR should probably look at the Clash. Have it at Daytona every 5 years, and then people get it, but then they miss it and they want to come back, and it doesn't become kind of like old hat.
Yeah. Charlie, again, this goes back to changing times, man. I know we keep reminiscing here today on the show, but it's hard to get away from it for me. Daytona Speed Weeks. Notice that word week. It's not week. It's weeks, plural, plural. It used to be called Daytona Speed Weeks. We'd be down there for 2 weeks. The teams would. Guess what? The fans would, right? If they weren't there for the whole 2 weeks, they were there for the last week, right? And the reason being, we had the Busch Clash on Sunday. We had the ARCA race on Sunday. We had practice right before that, all that weekend going on, practice and qualifying and all kinds of stuff for a few days. Then the week between the Clash and the 500, we was on the racetrack every day. There were practices every single day until you run the duels on Thursday, right? You run those races, and then they would have, gosh, I forget what race. I always had the Xfinity or Busch Grand National on Saturday. Then you had an ARCA or whatever it was again, or something else, maybe the trucks then on Fridays. So it was racing at the racetrack every day, right? Then you had all the other racetracks. You had Volusia County, right? You had New Smyrna Beach. They had races going on all the time. Heck, we had the World Outlaws running up at New Smyrna, the dirt track for a number of years. We had late models down there. We had, talk about late model dirts. Then we had all the asphalt hot shoes from across the country. They were all down there. The modifieds from up northeast, they would be down there for a week and a half, 2 weeks racing. Every night there's racing going on. Then we had the trade show, the biggest trade show. Well, not any longer, but not as big as SEMA is now, but a large trade show, racing trade show that was there at the convention center every year, right? I mean, there was just stuff to do. And if you got bored with all the racing crap, with the wife or whoever, let's take an hour and ride over here to Orlando and go to Disney World, right? You could mix that in. So it was 2 weeks of just pure excitement and fun for the competitors, for the fans, right? And, with a lot of this stuff happened with COVID. We cut out a lot of the practice and a lot of time at the racetracks that got cut out with COVID caused a lot of that. But, nowadays, I'm not sure that we could support 2 weeks of speed weeks any longer like we used to, mainly because it costs too friggin' much to stay in a motel that long, right? And to eat out that long and all that. I mean, people don't have discretionary funding as like they used to, Charlie. And I think, maybe that doesn't get talked about enough in all this stuff, right? Maybe You know, people just don't have dollars for discretionary stuff like they used to have. Just because, as we all know in our country, the pay scale is not matched with the cost of living right now. It's kind of out of whack. I think maybe that gets overlooked in some of these conversations. Maybe the fans still love to go, wants to go, hell, can't afford it, right? And so they don't go. But yeah, it's just to run the class again, to run it in a different place. Maybe take it to Daytona once every 5 years, unless you're going to bring back speed weeks the way it used to be. I don't see the class being there every year. It does not make sense to me to do that. It makes more sense to run them at Bowman Gray or at South Boston or wherever each year.
All right, Shane LaRock, his suggestion is rotate the clash between Daytona, The Rock, North Wilkesboro, and Bowman Gray. How about this on the old X? We're calling it X now. I used to call it Twitter /X. It's just X now. But Rick Mast tweets. I have my light
cool.
There. But you're talking about Days of Thunder.
Yeah.
And you have the car, the Days of Thunder Chevy Lumina, and you said last night, had a lot of fun doing this, still got the helmet and suit, paid good also, huh?
That's right. That's right. It did. That was in 90. That's when that was let's see, me and my father-in-law had A.G. Dillard together, 88, 89, and then in 90 I broke that back out on my own. And funds were very scarce, Charlie, right? I mean, you scrapped for every dollar you had and you raced for every dollar you had, right? And we went down there in 89, I guess, and led the 500 with Travis Carter and did all that. But, evidently I was too young then. I was too young to get in a cup car. That's what they all told me. I had to be 30 or whatever it was to get in a cup car. So when I went back, so the movie deal was 90. So when I went back in 91, at the end of 90, honest to God, I had 3 cup offers. Okay. But, it was the weirdest thing, but that's a whole different story. But so I go to Daytona in 90. And the Hendricks needed a driver for the movie car, so I did the deal down there, and it was a cool deal. It was a lot of fun, Because here's the deal. Here's what happened. It was a Hendrick program, right? And the other cars, 2 other cars. I think Greg Sachs drove one, and I believe it's either Bobby Hamilton or Tommy Ellis. I think Tommy Ellis was Bobby drove some other places, but I think it was Tommy Ellis. Well, these guys were all Hendrick crew guys, right? Doing these movie cars, along with the Hendrick doing his regular thing. Well, we'd go out and practice. I'd go out and practice. And man, my car was fast. I ain't kidding. It was fast, right? And we'd come in and they'd work on it some more, and I'd talk to them, and we'd do some stuff and help it. And finally, I went out one time, and I mixed it up with everybody. We were in a group of cars, man, and I went through them, and I kind of took the lead of the draft, just working with all the regular cars. I came in and I was telling them on the radio what I thought. They said, "Go and get out, Rick." I said, "Huh? Just go and get out." I said, "All right." I got out. They just put the cover over it. I said, "We done?" "Yeah, we're done." "Why?" "Well, everybody's starting to get upset. We're supposed to be movie cars, but we're acting like race cars right now. So we got to stop this." What was going on? The guy that was heading my deal up, kind of a crew chief with the organization, another guy had another deal up. Well, these guys had competition within themselves, right? About the movie cars. Who the hell had the fastest movie car, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of unbeknownst to me at the time. That's why they were working so hard, I think, to make a car so fast. And hell, I'm like, man, let's pull out of the movie and run the 500. This is a badass race car here, right? And of course, that didn't work out. Didn't do that. But I'll tell you one thing was funny with that. We went into a meeting with Bill France. It was me, Mr. Hendrick, Jimmy Johnson, that used to run Mr. Hendrick's organization, and the other 2 drivers. And Mr. France was telling us, listen, guys, y'all get to start this race. We're talking about the qualifying races. Y'all get to start this race. He says, you're going to start at the back. He says, I forget the words he said, but basically, if you screw up, the mafia is we're going to call mafia, put a hit on you, right? You don't mess up the race. He was very concerned that he was letting cars start the race without going through the qualifying procedure, right? Now, all the three of these cars could have qualified and got into the qualifying races easily, the speed they had. But, because they were movie cars, we didn't do all that. So it went against the grain of everything he'd ever done. You just don't let a car start a race. So he was kind of uptight about it to begin with, but he knew the significance of a Tom Cruise racing NASCAR movie. He knew what that was all about. But anyhow, when he got done with his spiel, I was like, Mr. France, oh, excuse me. I said, let me ask you something. He said, what? I said, I hear what you're saying. I understand. And I certainly won't do anything like that. And I said, but what if on the last lap of the race, we come off of turn 4, and I come off of turn 4, and there's a whole friggin' field done wrecked, right? And they're all spinning and going through the grass and down pit road. And I come through there and take a checkered flag first. What about that scenario? He said, Rick, I said, yeah, you want to be a part of my sport. Yeah, you want to be, you want to be a part of my cup. You've been a part of my sport in Busch Grand National, yeah. You want to be a part of my sport in Winston Cup, don't you? Right? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I would suggest if that scenario comes up that you find you a wall and you turn your car into the wall and hit it as hard as you can and do not dare get anywhere near that start finish line, because if you do, you won't be part of my NASCAR Winston Cup world. I said, yes, sir, Mr. France. Not a problem. You got it, baby. I won't win the race. Right? So that was a funny. I don't think Mr. Hendrick thought that was real funny. I don't think any of them understood I don't think any of them at that point knew my dry humor well enough to understand where I was going with that. So, but anyhow.
I love it. All right, let's end on this. We got 65 people watching. Almost 800 have been watching this whole last hour almost. We got to get your Super Bowl pick, your Super Bowl preview. We got Chiefs versus Eagles. For me, I live in St. Louis. There's a lot of St. Louis fans since we don't have a team anymore. Our Rams went back to LA. A lot of St. Louis fans have kind of jumped aboard the Kansas City Chiefs bandwagon. You see a lot of Patrick Mahomes jerseys at my kids' schools and all that. I have nothing against the Chiefs, but I'm kind of tired of them winning. So I just like to see new teams win. So I'm picking I don't know if I'm picking. I want the Eagles to win just because I feel like the Chiefs have won a lot, and I want to see a new team. What about you?
The Chiefs, they've got the Jimmy Johnson effect going on right now, Charlie.
Yeah.
Right? Tired of seeing them winning. Here's my deal on this thing. I love Andy Reid. I hated when they booted him out of, where was it? Philly, right? Yeah, Philly.
Philly, yeah.
Years ago. I love some of the stuff he had to go through with his kids and the turmoil he went through. I love the way he conducts himself, the way he coaches, the way his humanitarianism towards other people. I love him. I love Patrick Mahomes. Got tired of watching him win, like Jimmy Johnson. I'm tired of watching him win, but I love him. I like his family, his wife. I love all that, right? Philadelphia, I like the quarterback, right? Hate the friggin'
Jalen
fans.
Hurts.
Jalen Hurts. Love Jalen Hurts. Hard to pull for Philadelphia when every time you turn a YouTube on, there's a Philadelphia Eagle fan beating the hell out of somebody in the grandstands, right? And I guess that started with me with time the Eagles fans booed Santa Claus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just hard for me to pull for them. But I will say this. When the Redskins this year did what they did, I'm sorry, Commanders, which they announced this week that it would not, the owner announced it would not go back to Redskins. End of discussion. But anyhow, so when the Commanders watched, and Commanders are my team, or Redskins, rather, Commanders. When they played the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm like, damn, the Eagles are friggin' good. I mean, they're just flat ass good. My prediction is the Eagles going to win, right?
Okay.
Who do I want to win? It would be the Chiefs if it wasn't for the Jimmy Johnson effect. So I wouldn't have a problem with the Eagles winning, even if they don't like Santa Claus.
So you're saying Eagles, and you want Eagles, right?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I want Eagles, but I just feel like, the Eagles as a team, they have a really good team. And now so does KC. But I think at the end of the day, to me with Patrick Mahomes, because I like to gamble every once in a while, and it's like, I'm just kind of done betting against Patrick Mahomes in big games, right?
Exactly.
And the regular season's a different story because their spreads have gotten so big. And this is going back like 5 years that they didn't cover a lot in the regular season because, I mean, you're looking at like 9-10 point spreads in the NFL regular season, which is crazy. But for me, if I was putting my own money on the line, and I know what Mahomes lost to the Bucks and Tom Brady, right? That was whatever it was 3-4 years ago. But it's really hard for me to bet against Patrick Mahomes at this point in his career. So even though I want the Eagles to win, I'll give you a score. I think it's going to be another great game. When they played a couple years ago, it was 38-35. I'm going to say 31-28 Chiefs, unfortunately, even though I want the Eagles to win.
Well, you're probably right. Doesn't matter as long as it's a good game, right?
That's right.
Unless the Commanders are in it where I cheer for them, or the Cowboys in it where I can throw beer bottles at them, it doesn't excite me as much. And who's doing the halftime show?
I think is it Kendrick Lamar, the rapper? I think somebody let me know. I believe he just won a bunch of Grammys. I think that's the case, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Okay.
So
Elvis won't be there.
Elvis will not be in the building, from what I've heard, but we shall see. All right. On that note, let's wrap her up. Rick, thank you very much, sir. Charlie Marlow, Rick Mast. This is the Rick Mast Show. Please comment, like, subscribe. We're going to have so much content, so many shows now that NASCAR season has started.
It's going to be a fun year, man.
It's
going to be a fun year talking about stuff.
Yes, sir.
And,
all right,
I
Rick.
might just start coming out of my shell, Charlie.
I love it.
We need more.
We need more Rick
Dirty
Mast.
Dirty Mo Media's now unhinged or whatever they're calling it. I don't know what that means, but I'm like, well, damn, I'll come out of a shell, a little unfiltered. I'll come out of a shell, see what happens. Drive viewership. Everybody have fun.
We'll see you, buddy. Thank you, everybody. End stream.